It all started with a very simple idea. Tell the stories of how successful middle market CEOs made it to the corner office. I'm Brant Handley, founder and managing director of Resource Options International, or ROI. We're the USA's premier executive search firm focused exclusively on empowering middle market companies to attract, hire, and retain A players while transforming top executives' careers and lives. ROI's Into the Corner office is dedicated to discovering how middle market CEOs advance their career, and we're making these remarkable and sometimes quite unbelievable stories available to you for the very first time. Listen and learn about the challenges they've overcome, the interesting people they've met along the way, and the lessons learned that steered these executives' unique journey into a middle market corner office of their own. I know you enjoy these CEO stories as much as I've enjoyed recording them. So thank you for listening today. And if you like what you've heard, rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm looking forward to you joining me on the next great middle market CEO adventure into the corner office. Today, my guest is Matt Buley, CEO of Hope Haven. Matt has been an inspirational social sector executive with a 20-year track record of propelling organizations towards their vision. A warm, energetic, and motivating leader, he drives healthy and effective work culture. As CEO of Hope Haven, he has strategic and P&L responsibility for a $50 million budget and leads a staff team of 750. Matt was a lead advocate for legislation during the 111th U.S. Congress that keeps siblings together in adoption and has raised millions of dollars for programmatic and capital projects. He was recently named the 2022 Executive of the Year by the Iowa Association of Community Providers. Matt holds a Master of Public Affairs from the University of Minnesota and a Bachelor of Arts, magna cum laude, in English and Speech Communication from St. Cloud State University. He married his college sweetheart, Teresa, and they have 4 children whom they adopted as a family group in the Philippines. His hobbies include reading, fitness, and finding his way outside with the family and their 2 dogs. Matt Buley, welcome into the corner office.
Thanks so much, Brant. It's great to be on with you. And by the way, it's been great to listen to the podcast too. So enjoying it.
Oh, I appreciate that. Always good to get the good feedback. Well, we got a lot of listeners out there and a lot of folks that work in the social sector. And as we spoke a month or 2 ago when we first got introduced, you didn't get started there. And we want to talk about that transition because there's a lot of folks out there who, like you, maybe started in the private sector and ended up in the public. And, you know, the thinking behind that's, of course, an important thing. But we always like to start at the beginning. So, Matt, tell us a little bit about your early family life, where you grew up, brothers and sisters. What part of the country was that?
Yeah, thanks, Brent. So I'm sitting in my office in Rock Valley, Iowa, in the northwest corner of the state, which is not traveling too far from where I grew up. I was born in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Yeah. My parents, a few years after that, moved down to a small-ish town called Albert Lea, which everybody knows if they know it because they've driven by on either Interstate 90 or 35. So it's at that cross section up in Minnesota. And graduated high school from there and spent all of my formative years in Albert Lea. So that's definitely where I'm from.
Brothers and sisters?
I have 2 sisters, both younger, one of which was born when I was 15. So sometimes say that she had 4 parents, you know. One of those kids, so.
Lucky her.
Yeah, right, exactly. Worked out great for her.
Oh, gosh. What about mom and dad? What kind of work do they do?
My mom and dad, my dad was an officer in the Army Reserve and National Guard, and spent a lot of time focused on that, although he also worked vocationally in a few other areas, one of which was as a jeweler. And cool. He actually worked when I was in high school. He actually went through a job loss, and it was very formative for me to have walked through that as a child with going through that. Yeah. I think actually had a lot of impact on me in my future and just some of the drive that I have. But
how old were you at the time when Dad went through that?
I remember him coming home. So they sold this jeweler, and I was in 6th grade, and I remember him coming home on that last day. Of course, we knew it was coming, and that's a heavy thing, you know.
Yeah.
something that they were carrying. But as a kid at that age, you're very aware of it, and
Yeah.
not like today. When that happened, it took actually a couple years before he was working again, and that was significant, of
And some
course. So,
lean times then. What were you, like single digits at that time, or already in your pre-adolescent years, or what? How old were you?
yeah, in those adolescent years for
Yeah.
sure. So kind of
Yeah, it's
into middle
hard.
school there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and my mom was when I was a kid, I remember her mostly working at J.C. Penney.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
I always looked good at the start of the school year.
Got all those special back to school
Yeah,
deals,
that's right.
employee discounts.
Exactly. And then she worked administratively for the school system, largely actually after that. So that's in fact, she worked at the high school when I was in high school. And
Yeah.
so a lot of memories of my
Yeah.
mom around.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. And what about school? Were you a good student?
That's a great question. I've heard you ask others that, so I thought about that on my way to work this morning. No, no, I was not a good student because to me, being a good student means you care about it, at least
Yeah.
in part. And there's two parts to the story, but when my mom would say, "Hey, I've got parent teacher conferences tonight, so I know what I'm going to hear," and it was always, "Matt has so much potential."
Yeah.
I was one
Yeah.
of those kids that wanted to hang out with friends, wanted to be the class clown, whatever it was not very focused on my studies. I loved to read. I even like to do creative writing in the summer. I would mess around, and I was one of those kids who always got one of the awards at the end of the year for being at school every day. So it wasn't necessarily not caring, but I didn't enjoy it. Apparently, I have a
You
very
didn't have the interest, probably. It was some of the,
I
yeah,
think
yeah.
I think that was it.
The reading and the English, that kind of captured imagination. What was your favorite book growing up? Remember from elementary school or high school?
That's a great question. You know what I remember a lot is reading Hardy Boy books. So those
Those are great.
I don't know
Oh
how
yeah.
many of those there were, but
Yeah. Oh yeah. A
I know
lot.
I devoured them. Yeah. So
Cool. Cool. What about outside activities? Involved in sports or, any clubs off campus, yearbook, any of that kind of stuff?
yeah, I was really involved in stuff when I was in high school. I was a late bloomer, so I got mildly athletic about the time I was 19. So it was
Okay.
a waste for high school sports, but I did like it. I played hockey. I
Oh,
dabbled in football. Actually, I played tennis all through high school. So I did get involved in that, and to this day, I still really like doing that, and we like getting
yeah.
outside and all that good
Cool.
stuff. But yeah, a lot of events. I was in yearbook. I did the sports editor stuff for yearbook, and was in choir, and just kind of all those various things. Was always up for joining into something, which I do think had some impact on my grades. Again, it was just there was a little bit of distraction for me. I was
Right.
more interested
Right.
in doing other things until I got to college, and then I really started to take it seriously. So
What about entrepreneurial things growing up? Did you have the ubiquitous paper route or sell Christmas cards or maybe help out at the jewelry store?
oh, I loved to work, and that has followed me my whole life.
Yeah.
I had, just like you said, I had a shopper paper route when you could have that at the age I was, which
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if that was 12 or 13. It was somewhere in there. And then I graduated to the actual newspaper, the Albert Lee Tribune. You could deliver that then. I think there was an age threshold, but there's a grocery chain in the Midwest here, and really central Midwest. In fact, it's not all over here, but it's called Hy-Vee. And
Yeah.
that
Heard of
was
it.
my first, quote unquote, real job. But I
Right.
I picked rocks out in cornfields for farmers. If there was money to be made, I was in. And we won't talk about what the hourly rate was at that.
No, no. We could talk about how you spend it though. I'm
Yeah.
interested in that. Was it kind of, did you have a savings, kind of mentality? I mean, you went through some times with, dad out of work and so forth, but did you have to contribute to the family or were you, someone who, had his vices and collected with those baseball cards? What was,
Yeah.
what were your spending things?
That's great. To my parents' credit, I have no memory of having contributed. They must have protected me from that. I can remember
Yeah.
getting to an age where I would buy clothes, and I like to do that. But when I was a kid, I was all about music. I would go and buy
Ah,
albums, and these were on
yeah.
vinyl.
Yeah.
And singles.
Well, we should explain to our listeners what vinyl is.
Right.
Vinyl is when records used to
This
come out
thing.
in 45s and 33 and a thirds. and it spins. And it
Cool to
turns out.
have them.
Well, that's
So
true.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I
but I
know my
haven't jumped back
30-year-old
in.
son's got one.
Yeah, right. So many people do. It's actually pretty
Uh,
cool. And they say the sound is better. I don't. To me, I'd rather just turn Spotify on. I'm kind of lazy now, but
I'm totally that way now. I got on my channels. What music did you like during high school?
you know what? I can remember my parents being amazed when my buddies and I got into the Beatles. So by that point, it was
Yeah.
CDs, and I can remember early on, I didn't like if I got a paycheck and I went out to eat. I figured out early on that I didn't have anything to show for it then. So it
Mm,
wasn't like I was necessarily investing or anything. I was saving.
yeah,
But it
yeah.
was more about, well, what do I have to show for it? So, in high school, I had a bunch of CDs because we would drive up to Best Buy in Rochester or in
Oh yeah.
Burnsville, Minnesota, and buy CDs, and that circles back around because that's where I
Yeah, we'll talk about Best Buy in a minute. Yeah, yeah.
so I had a lot of interest in music for sure, and to this day that's true. But all the CDs are gone now.
That's
So
right. Yeah, we
this
got that
digital
Spotify on
music
our
came,
iPhone,
right?
right?
Exactly. Some people are hanging onto their CDs, and I'm going, I don't get it. But hey, at least there's
No,
somewhere there to buy mine.
can't store those things. Can't
No,
keep them around.
no, that's where I'm at.
So you went to St. Cloud State. Now, were you the first in your family to go to university? Did mom and dad have degrees, or was that something that they had motivated you to do, or are you following in their footsteps?
It's a great question. My dad did. He had from another state school in Minnesota. He had a sociology degree. My mom,
Yeah,
she had gone to an administrative sort of certificate program,
cool.
and built off of that. So there weren't a ton of college degrees just in our family and extended family. I do think that it was something that was built into me.
Yeah,
My mom did a really good job. And I've thought about this. I would like to go back in time and study her and figure out how she built into this growing boy confidence. It's just
mm.
it can be such an elusive thing, but
Oh, yeah.
somewhere in there, I became convinced that whatever is going to come, I would figure it out. And that's
Mm.
just to me, that's
Wow.
sort of this basis of confidence. And so
Yeah.
I knew that I could handle it. Although I can remember, so I graduated high school, and my GPA was somewhere in the twos. It was middling at best, and that goes back to what I was talking about earlier. But I can vividly remember sitting at my desk after it was a quarter system in college, and
Right.
I had gotten my first report card, and I was staring at that thing, and it had 3 B's and a C. And I can remember realizing this report card was not going to go to anybody else. It didn't matter to anybody else anymore. I was
That's right.
an adult
Yeah.
here. Who I was
Yeah.
doing this for was me. So
Was
sink
you?
or
Yeah.
swim. This wasn't about proving anything to anybody. I just needed to do it or not do it.
Yeah. Well,
And that was
and
the
3 B's and a C is a step up from the mid twos from a GPA standpoint. So
well, yeah,
that's
it's
good news.
right. Yeah, it's somewhere in there. But after that, I don't know what it was. But by the start of the next quarter, I had stopped screwing around, and from there, I got good grades. So yeah, it took me a while to wake up. So it's never too late.
Yeah, it's great. And you pursued an English degree, so kind of your love of writing guided your degree choice. Is that true?
You know,
Or love of reading and writing?
for sure that was there. I can remember somebody telling me, this 4-year degree is largely about getting your card stamped, get your
Yeah.
bachelor's, and
Right.
move on to the next thing. Don't get too hung up. I actually went to school thinking I would be a teacher, and then got
Hmm.
almost to the first step in student teaching and realized I didn't have the patience for it. And
Right.
decided to just switch into, and it just made this English and communications. I did speech communication in there as well, and just enrolled with that, and it
Yeah.
worked. Getting into Best Buy from there, it was kind of what I needed just to get in. I can remember, and we'll talk about Best Buy, but
Yeah. So, well, Best Buy was your first job,
yeah,
but were
right,
there other jobs that you had during college? Were you working? Did you help, pay for
yeah.
tuition and so forth, or
I paid
had
for
scholarships?
college. Yeah, I
Yeah.
paid for it all on my own. So,
Yeah. Fantastic.
yeah, that was part of it was my parents being lower middle class. That
Hmm.
was a contribution because I was able to get grants and scholarships that
Sure.
wouldn't have otherwise been available to me. So that
Right.
did help, but I worked the whole time. I did
Yeah.
sports writing for a while. I worked at a gas station for a while,
Right.
just whatever it took. I can remember sitting and doing my homework while I, waited for the next customer to come in and buy their
Yeah. Yeah.
cigarettes or whatever. So it's just,
And then full-time summer jobs too, in
yeah,
addition to working in the academic year. Yeah.
always. Yeah, I did
Yeah. Yeah.
did siding one summer, worked at John Deere in a distribution center another summer. So yeah, I was always keeping busy with those things.
So Best Buy was the first job after graduation. Now, did they come to recruit at St. Cloud, or how did you find? I mean, you'd been there before buying CDs and
Yeah,
vinyl, so
right.
we know that.
Yeah,
But what attracted them to you as an employer?
yeah, the issue at hand was not me wanting to work at Best Buy. It was more a question of whether or not I could get my foot in the door. But
Right. Right.
they did recruiting because they're building up, so that they had brought in a new VP who wanted to overhaul inventory. Just-in-time shipping and some of those kinds of things were really
Wow.
starting to take hold, and they decided to recruit recent college graduates. And it was this period of time where there were jobs to be had. It was shortly thereafter that the tech bubble burst, and that changed for a while. But I know that a lot of fellow students were getting multiple offers, and we had options. So I met Best Buy. They did recruiting at St.
Came
Cloud
on
State.
campus. Yeah.
Yep. And I got my way into the job. And it's definitely, it was one of those things that you don't realize how good you have it until it's over with. But they brought in like 20 of us who had just graduated college right at the same time to do
Wow.
the same thing, but in their different business units. And we just
Yeah.
had an absolute blast. All these
Oh,
people the same age. It was just such a fun place to work. To me, it was just a great culture
yeah.
experience. Whether
Yeah.
or not that was something that they sat down and said, "Hey, this will be really good," and these young people will get all this energy from one another. It worked that way though, and I was there. The stock just absolutely shot.
That was about 20 years ago. It was not too long after their founding, or the real growth period, I guess, right? Because
That's
they started
exactly
in
right.
Minnesota and then they
They
began
did.
expanding nationally. Yeah.
Yeah, they were the Sound of Music
Right.
early
Right.
on, and then they became Best Buy. And we were
Yeah.
part of what I did there was the new store openings, and
Wow. Cool.
that was happening a lot at that time. And of course, the footprint was different. Now Best Buy's gone to a smaller store.
Yeah.
At that time, it was more Target just for
Yeah. The big
electronics.
box. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, it was great opportunity there to step into that role and to have the management scope that it had. I can remember Hewlett Packard. So I was in the computer division on the marketing side
Yeah.
when, for the first time, they did $1 billion of business at Best Buy, and we all got like a Coach wallet. I was like, my gosh, this is crazy. This is a whole different ballpark. But
Yeah.
yeah, so it was really cool. It was a fantastic place to learn. When I started the stock, I need to get these numbers exactly right, but I can get close. The stock was selling somewhere in the mid sixes.
Yeah.
I left, it had split twice and was in the 60s.
Wow.
We shot up the Fortune 500,
Yeah.
and it was just it was a blast to be a part
Yeah. Good
of.
fun. Now, did you manage people in that job, or were you an individual contributor for your 3.5, 4 years there?
Yeah, I did. They moved me into a senior analyst role, and at
Right.
that point, you had a small team. So that actually, when I was in high school and college, I was working sometimes in the summer at Godfather's Pizza, a pizza place, and that was the first time I was made a supervisor and had at least some team
Yeah.
responsibility. But then that was, professionally, that was the first time it happened, was when I was at Best Buy. Indeed.
What were some of those challenges in those early years of managing others?
I can get tempted at times to micromanage.
Mm.
I've had to be observant of that in my career to say, just step back. And actually now I don't find that hard to do. But
Yeah.
now being a CEO, the people who report to me are director level people who are high performers. They're not hard to manage.
Right.
Where management gets, I think, more complicated or sticky here is it's happening not at the level of people that are reporting to me, but early on, definitely everybody has a different work ethic
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah.
You're going to face different issues, and that was all pretty trial by fire, which is not to say I didn't have support. We had an HR department
Yeah.
and all of that kind of stuff. But it was after jumping into the social sector, did so at a couple of smaller organizations where you had your team and you were the one to figure it out. So
Right. Right.
you're a
But now
little
you
bit
made that.
swimming. So
Yeah, you made that shift at Best Buy. So tell us a little bit about that, because you were there about 3.5 years, then you went to Hospitality House Youth Development, I think, right? Was that your
yeah,
transition?
exactly. So
And what
that's
was it that, yeah, what was kind of the thought process? Tell us a little bit about that.
yeah, I am. So I can step back now from my perspective and say at that time in my career, I thought the grass would be greener in the social services sector.
Mm,
I don't think I realized the impact that I could have, including in my community, if I stayed at Best Buy and worked my way up the marketing ranks. That would have been a very useful thing to have done. What I thought was, hey, I don't want to make shareholders money anymore. I want to do
mm,
something. I want to drive home at the end of the day, and I want to feel like somebody's life was improved in
yeah,
some way because I was there. Now, again, that was short-sighted and what I found is now I've been in nonprofit or social sector work throughout since then, and you don't drive home at the end of every day thinking about that kind of stuff.
yeah, yeah,
It's not the way it works. I was a little naive, but that was the driving factor. And then Hospitality House primarily does youth serving programs in
yeah.
North Minneapolis. And so it was entirely different. I went from, all marketing meeting to midnight basketball and programs like
Right,
that.
right.
And I started doing marketing for them and then I got into fundraising, but it was a
What
totally,
was the impetus? Had you always had kind of a social, service conscious? Was there volunteering that you did? Something that your mom maybe, did and observed? Where do you think that came from in that early? Because you were 23, 24, something like that, right, when you first joined?
I think it was maybe a missional orientation to say,
Hmm.
I want to do something that's meaningful. But
Yeah.
that's not to say that we didn't do things that were volunteer centric. Certainly, it was the case at church, and I was
Right.
involved in some things like we did something that was a support our troops thing when I was in high
Sure.
school, and it was student led, and so there was some inkling that way. But I would say there was something that about it was more meaning at work than probably there's this specific demographic of people that I want to step in and do
Hmm.
something to
Yeah.
help them. And that has followed me from the perspective that it has been different people groups that have been supported in the organizations that I've been in. But
Right.
certainly, it was a great organization doing great things. And it was fun to make the jump into it.
Was it an advertised position? Did you have somebody that contacted you? What kind of opened the door for you to that opportunity?
Yeah, that was an advertised
Yeah.
position. So I
Yeah.
just saw it. Now, then I came to find out my wife and I we got married young, and
Yeah.
got
So you
plugged.
were married at the time.
Yes, I
Marriage when you
was.
made that
Yep.
change. Yeah.
So we were plugged into a church and come to find out that church was supporting this organization.
Mm.
So there was kind of some neat inroads, but I only knew that
Yeah.
because I saw
Yeah.
it in the Star Tribune
Yeah.
newspaper. So,
Cool.
yeah.
So you spent a few years there, and then a big portion of your career was with Children's Shelter, right, where you had your first CEO position, right? You became
Yep.
president there. Tell
Yeah.
us a little bit about their mission and the transition there, because obviously that was a focus on youth as well.
Yeah, for sure. And there's a tie for me in that. I've
Yeah.
always just enjoyed kids and being around them. So at the Children's Shelter of Cebu, the heart of their organization is in Cebu City, Philippines, which is
Yeah.
the second
Right.
largest metropolitan area in the
Right.
Philippines. And I
I've
got
actually visited there. I lived in
you,
Singapore for 10 years in my corporate career and had office in
sure.
Manila and have gone to Cebu. And I'm sure you've been there several times as well. And it's a beautiful part of that archipelago.
It really is. I mean, talk about scuba diving and
Yeah.
the
Right.
ocean there is
Right.
just absolutely gorgeous. So yeah, I,
Crystal
I
clear.
went there a lot. Yeah. So
Yeah.
we were based in the Twin Cities, and a lot of my work was focused around, fundraising and donor development. But then that began to expand. I was going to the Philippines a few times a year, and of course, you don't do a trip from the Midwest to the Philippines in a few days. You're going to be gone for a while. So I was getting some nice chunks of time
Yeah. Yeah.
over there, and just a fantastic place. There, the purpose of that work is to provide housing for children that have been orphaned, and then also an
Right.
education program, so they have their own school. And actually, a side note, my wife came with me on a trip, and we met our 4 kids. So they were living at the shelter.
Oh,
We
wow.
met them and felt a clear calling to adopt them. We thought, well, we would adopt.
Wow.
We got married. We said we're not going to have kids. And then we started to think, well, maybe we'll adopt, but I don't think we imagined adopting older kids. Well, we met this sibling
Yeah.
group and went, wow, I really feel like God is telling us to adopt these kids. And we wanted to
Nice.
process and digest that. So six
Now,
months
how old were
later,
the kids? How old were your kids at that time?
yeah, they came home when they were 14, 11, 9, and 7.
Wow.
Blaine,
Oh,
Minnesota.
wow.
Yeah, English
Yeah.
as a second language, and
Yeah.
they're awesome. We have with the 4 of them are somewhat nearby. We were just up in the Twin Cities and visiting them. The one lives in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, which is where we live. But we got 3 grandkids
Yeah.
now, and it's way too cool.
Oh,
It was fun. But
yeah.
anyway,
Fabulous.
yeah,
Yeah.
so that was the purpose of the Children's Shelter Cebu. I had super interesting.
So it was based in Minneapolis mostly for development purposes then, right? For
Yeah,
fundraising, et cetera. Because normally
yeah.
you would have been based in Cebu, or how did that work? Was it a small staff here and a larger staff there, or how did that work organizationally?
Yeah, so small staff in the Twin Cities, and then the larger staff
Yeah.
was over in the Philippines
Yeah.
because there's a Bethel University in St. Paul, Minnesota. That was where a group of young people were going to college, graduated, and then ended up on this mission trip to the Philippines that decided they were going to do something
Yeah.
about the situation with orphans there. And so this organization started
Right.
and then is based in the Twin Cities. And I,
Yeah.
yeah, so here I start, and the title was U.S. Director. After 7, 8 years in that role, our founder and president sat down with me and said, I think it would be more useful to the organization for the president to be in Minnesota. And I thought, I got to get out of here. I've gotten to report to the president in the Philippines. If the president's in Minnesota, I'm going to be reporting to them. I'm never going to go to the Philippines anymore. My job is going to change completely. So I have this,
Yeah.
crisis for about a week. A week later, we
Right.
sat down again, and he said, "Well, no, I was thinking you should have that job." And so I was like, "Oh, wait,
Ah.
and this is a different
Oh,
situation."
that's what you meant.
Right, exactly. Yeah, thanks for the panic attack for a week.
Yeah, for my week, right? Oh goodness. Well, that's great. So you just stayed. So you stayed put.
Yeah, March 1st of the following year, we went from him being my boss to me being his
Yeah.
boss, and
Wow.
they just retired a couple of years ago, and we navigated that change, I think, as best as anybody could ask for. It was
Yeah.
just an honor to work with somebody. These are incredible people. They moved from
Right.
St. Paul, Minnesota to Cebu City, Philippines, and lived there their entire working
The
career.
entire life.
It
Yeah.
just, I
Wow.
was surrounded by remarkable people in that job, and
Yeah.
the President Paul Healy was one of them. So
Right. Fabulous. Now you left there after a little over 13 years. That had to be tough. But tell us about that transition, and of course, your mission at Hope Haven.
yeah, thanks. It was tough. Big switch. Obviously, we had adopted our kids from the shelter,
Yeah.
had been there for a long time. I ended up talking to a recruiter who was representing Hope Haven. And
Right.
here's this organization not so far away, less than 4 hours by car, in this small town of Rock Valley, Iowa, which is
Mm.
where our service area is pretty big, but our headquarters is here. And at Children's Shelter of Cebu, I had about 135 employees. And Hope Haven is quite a bit bigger. There we have
Yeah.
750 staff.
Huge.
I happened to talk to the recruiter. I don't even remember how or why we had this conversation, but I said to him, this organization here is only $2 million a year, but that dollar is going so far in the Philippines that our operation is actually bigger than you'd think.
Mm.
Well, after this, as we're having this conversation, starting to see all the pieces that have been put together, where I have this corporate marketing background, and here at Hope Haven, we have our own manufacturing company, which
Right.
exists because it allows us to support people with disabilities.
That's right.
But
Yeah.
this has really started to stand on its own, and certainly takes the business acumen of our leaders within the manufacturing area. But then also Hope Haven we have this Hope Haven International Ministries. And so we send wheelchairs all over the world.
Mm.
There's also this international piece, which I had as a background. And then at my previous job at Children's Shelter Cebu, we had developed this niche of being able to take in kids with disabilities that other places
Oh.
just didn't have the ability to
Right.
do well
Yeah.
with that focus. And I had begun to realize that with the kids in the Philippines that had disabilities, when I first met them, I was really polite, but I had no concept that I could be friends with someone with a disability.
Mm.
Just didn't.
Mm.
I had not been exposed, and there was a real limitation in myself that I had no idea was there. As the years progress, and at the end of that, I'm starting to realize, wow, these folks are my friends.
Yeah.
We just have these kids that we were serving had become adults, and were just incredible people to have around. And I really noticed that was something that tuning
Ah,
work within me was hitting on
interesting.
this work with
Yeah.
individuals
Yeah.
with disabilities. So that, of
Cool.
course, all played into
Yeah.
coming to
Yeah.
Hope Haven. So
Right. Cool. Well, tell us a little about Hope Haven. So you've been there, gosh, a little over 5 years, and you came in as CEO,
I did.
right?
Yep.
There was an open position. It sounds like you had a recruiter against it.
Yep.
What, give me a step back, a little bit of the overall mission. You mentioned about manufacturing, obviously serving, disabled folks, and just tell us a little bit about the organization.
Yeah, so the organization exists to support individuals with disabilities. That happens in a few ways. Um, Number one, in terms of our budget, is supporting people in as independent of a living situation
Hmm.
as is fitting. So we do a lot of that. We have 60 homes where we support people. Most of those homes are relatively small, where there will be 4 people that live in them.
And these are mostly adults, right? Or
Yep.
are they also
They're,
teenagers or?
yeah, we do serve kids as well, but
Right.
mostly adults.
Mostly
Yes.
adults, yeah.
Yep.
Okay,
So
so
we have a program that serves just kids, and then we do some transitional stuff, and then of course the adults will make up the majority of it. So
right, right.
um, it- our we view our purpose as followers of Christ to support people in having the best opportunity in life that they,
Yeah, awesome.
and not what I have really appreciated about this organization. So I followed a long-term leader, so that's the second time I've done that. But there's true vision for how to be in partnership with people with disabilities. This is
Mm.
not a pat on the head approach to disability services. People are viewed as partners. They're viewed as having a voice.
Yeah.
That culture existed before me, and I've thought about some of the things I've taken on in terms of structural and leadership. It is really nice for me that I didn't come in and have to say, well, we're not even viewing people correctly. That
Mm.
wasn't the case at all. And Hope Haven has really been a leader in that way, and that I think that has continued. So anyway,
Must take a lot of empathy, Matt, right? I mean, do you feel that maybe developed a little bit? You mentioned about the tuning fork, whether that developed a little bit for you at Children's Shelter and then kind of further refined there at Hope Haven?
yeah, what's funny is I'll talk to other leaders here, and we will notice that we have there's a sense of empathy within us when it comes to people who we're here to support.
Yeah.
We have a staff member who's underperforming, we have a hard time with empathy. So it's just a curiosity
Huh.
of being in this line of work is, look, this is missional. It's a Christian organization. We
Yeah.
ought to be doing our best and giving our best. And so all of that gets centered around the people that we're here to support. And I think
Right.
we do that well. I think if somebody's not performing well to that mission, a lot of us struggle with empathy in those situations
Interesting.
because we
Interesting.
have
Yeah.
a high set of expectations for
Yeah.
the people who
Right.
are doing the work that they are. And I think there's good in that. And of course, everything has its strength and weakness, but
Yeah.
I think we can learn from that too.
Interesting perspective. Yeah. So this may be a difficult question or maybe an easy one, but you focus so much time on your youth. You're the director of development of the hospitality house youth, all your years at Children's Shelter, and now it sounds like more from an adult standpoint, serving more adults. Is that changed a leadership style in you? Do you do things differently, with the folks, particularly on your staff in this organization than you did in your two previous?
That's a really interesting question. I think that there's a lot of tie because of serving
Yeah.
populations that have been or are vulnerable. And so, from that perspective, I don't know how much that's caused a change in
Right.
perspective from a leadership standpoint. One thing that I know ties since leaving Best Buy and being in these three nonprofits is that you there's people get stuck a little bit in this thing that's called compassion fatigue. So you have teams that are so focused on this important work that they do at the center of the mission that they will burn themselves out to do it. I've
Yeah.
seen that in
Yeah.
all three places. So I think
Right.
it's a great question. I think they have more in common than they
Yeah. Interesting.
different. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you look for when you're investing in the people you hire into the organization?
Yeah, I love people who are curious,
Mm.
and would always want to see that in them.
Yeah.
We're I think we do a good job here of being the work hard, play hard sort. And
Right.
I think that has served the organization well over the years because there is a certain level of demanding that I think works well within the culture here. And so we can be a little sarcastic, but we have fun at work. Um,
Right.
and we're looking for people that are cut from that cloth and going to fit from that standpoint. And see,
Yeah.
of course, seeing the mission and the vision is something that uh, it is really going to hit their tuning fork too. That's going to be really important. One of the things, and everybody's dealing with this right now. We're kind of old hand at it in disability services. Is the workforce shortage? Um,
Yeah.
that's been
Well,
an
particularly with
ongoing
the
issue.
pandemic as well, right?
Yes,
And the
absolutely.
challenges there. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Shortages.
I think other industries and companies are now starting to, or not starting, this has been going on for a while. They now know what it's been like for this sector for a long time. And
Yeah.
so, that whole hiring, recruitment, and retention, those are things that we talk and think about a lot.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
just something I think is going to tend to follow us in these healthcare positions
Right.
for a long time. It just doesn't seem like it's something that's going to
It's not
change.
going to go away. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You'd mentioned curiosity, which is a great trait, and I hear so many of our CEO guests mention that. How do you get at that? Do you have a favorite interview question that you use, Matt, or what kind of dialogue do you have with candidates when you interview them to try to understand whether they've got the kind of curiosity you're looking for?
Yeah, there's simple things about drawing out of someone. Are you getting the sense that they like to engage in that in asking good questions? So
Yeah.
it's kind
Yeah.
of a funny way to answer your question, but if we get to the end of an interview, whether this is director or manager level or something below it, and somebody doesn't ask us any questions, that's a
Yeah.
signal that
Yeah.
this may
Right.
be, a great fit. It is hard. I think with a lot of things, it's hard to sometimes sleuth out, well, is this a person of curiosity? But I do think if people are talking about maybe a book that they've read, are they learners? Learning is one of my 5 strengths finders.
Right.
I know that that's
Right.
something I probably put more focus on than maybe is necessary. But I tie those two things together. If you're not interested in learning, you're probably not curious, right?
Yeah.
So,
Ask them what they're reading. What's the
yeah,
favorite book on their bedstand, right?
right, exactly. They don't have an
Love it.
answer for that.
Yeah.
Why not? So,
Right. Right. Yeah. Great. Well, Matt, we're just about out of time, but been a very enjoyable conversation. But we always ask all our CEO guests, what kind of career and life advice would you give someone that maybe wants to be in the corner office of their own, and particularly, working in the social justice space or the social sector? What would you say is, kind of the key things that they should look for or really want to achieve in that type of a career?
My observation is that we tend to be hard on ourselves,
Mm,
and we've heard it talked about, and I think more lately than I had before, but this idea of imposter syndrome, and we've all,
mm,
I know when I got offered the job here at Hope Haven and was going from $2 million a year budget to, well, at the time it was 40 million, we're a $50 million a year budget now. That was a huge jump. And
yeah.
I can remember being excited to have gotten the offer, excited to have agreed. My wife and youngest son, he was going to be the only one moving with us, that we had decided that this was something we could do. That was all really exciting. And then it hits you, wait a second, I'm going to be responsible on some level for the 750 people's
Yeah.
paychecks, and
Yeah.
some
Right.
contribution to their family on a
Right.
significant level. And what I guess the advice I would give is, if you don't belong in a corner office or in a senior leadership position, I think the circumstances around you are going to make that obvious.
Mm,
You're
mm,
really interested in it, and you're seeing your career progress and seeing the kinds of strengths within yourself that might make it possible. I guess the funny way I'd put it is, get yourself some imposter syndrome, just meaning it's really good to get to a point where you go, whoa,
yeah.
am
Right.
I up for this? And
Can
those
I really do
moments are
this? Yeah.
scary,
Yeah.
but they
Yeah.
are, I think they're instrumental in being a part of that push to engaging something more. And, Hope Haven, yeah, a lot bigger than Children's Shelter Cebu was, but it's different. There are things about leading an organization that are frankly easier. I have an HR department. I have where we had one person at CSC, and that was
Right.
new development for us. But you have leaders who really own their programs and divisions, and there's opportunity to learn from them. So, going back to Curious, I think there's just so much we can draw from the people around us, uh, that there's fantastic opportunity in them. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Super cool. Wise counsel. Matt Buley, CEO of Hope Haven, thank you so much for sharing your journey into the corner office.
it was great to be on. I appreciate it, Brent.
Thank you for listening to Into the Corner Office with Brant Hanley. We hope you enjoyed hearing our guest CEO story as much as we did. If you want to hear more CEOs reveal their journey into the corner office, please subscribe via iTunes and tell your friends and colleagues. For more information about Brant, Resource Options International, and the mighty middle market, visit www.goforroi.com. We look forward to having you join us for our next episode.